Welcome to the Sales Whisperer Podcast, Session 19. Are you podcasting? Hey, Sales Whisperer Podcast listeners, you are in for a treat as always. Today's guest is Cliff Ravenscraft, otherwise known as the Podcast Answer Man and owner of Podcasting A to Z. Cliff is arguably one of the best trainers and consultants in the realm of podcasting. We'll talk about some very amazing statistics and facts, but 40 of the 50 top podcasts in the business category are his clients. Cliff will talk about how he left his family business to pursue his passion, how his technology background laid the foundation, but how following his dream, following his passions, and becoming excellent at it is really the foundation for his success. So I hope you enjoy this interview with the Podcast Answer Man, Cliff Ravenscraft. Thanks for taking time to join the Sales Whisperer podcast.
Wes, thank you very much for the opportunity. I'm glad to be here, my friend.
They always say if you want to get smart, right, go teach something, right, and the teacher learns more than the student. And I started podcasting back in 2009 and stopped, and then picked it up. You are now episode 18. So I look forward to what I'm going to learn in these next few minutes with you.
Well, I look forward to having any conversation where I can share my passion for podcasting. So I'm looking forward to talking about anything you want to talk about.
Well, let's talk about something that may be unique. I know you do. We were just mentioning before we started recording, you do a lot of interviews, which is fantastic. I want to get into that, but you and I share something in common in that we came from a financial services background. I used to be in insurance as well, stocks and bonds, the whole nine yards. And I loved reading your story of how you made that transition. And it was even harder for you because it was a family-run business, right? But there's a lot of people out there. Before we get into, pearls of wisdom and little nuggets that I'm sure you have, can you help my listeners give them some pointers how they can make that transition from doing something maybe they feel forced into to truly following their passion?
Well, a couple things that helped me make the transition is, number one, I got debt free. And so that if there's one piece of information I'd give you is see if you can't, if you've got a good paying job, even if you hate it, see if you can't cut down expenses and discover a plan that's going to help you get completely 100% debt-free, or at least debt-free minus your mortgage. Because when you don't owe anybody anything, your options and opportunities seem to open up to you. A lot of things you can do in that situation that you can't do in others. And I was very thankful to have gotten to that place. I followed the Dave Ramsey Financial Peace University, or the Total Money Makeover Plan. And it took about 5 years to get out of $80,000 in debt, and we did. And that's one of the things that allowed us to make a big, bold move for me to quit my career in insurance. So that's number one.
Okay.
Let's see here. The other thing is to find out what it is that you want to do. And a lot of people, unfortunately, approach this in a completely different direction, and they want me to help them find a way to create a podcast or create find a niche where they can actually start making money. And that's their approach. It's like, hey, I don't know what I'm going to do yet, but I got to find something that's profitable because I can't handle this job that I'm doing right now, or I just got laid off, or whatever the case may be. I need to start generating enough income to support my family within the next 12 to 18 months. That's what they come to me with. And, it's not that it's impossible to do those things, but it's just not something that I personally focus on, because number one, I've never been in that position. I actually approach things from a completely different perspective, and I'm going to give you my favorite quote in the world, and it will give you an idea of my background, of where I come, and that is this: find something you love to do so much that you'd be willing to do it all day long for free. And then become so excellent at doing that one thing that people will eventually beg you to do it for money. They will pay you to do it.
Amen.
So those are my big ones. Now the thing is a lot of people come and say, okay, here's something I love to do, and when I do it, time flies. But can I get this thing to pay me X amount of dollars? Can I get $2,000 or $3,000 within 6 to 10 months? It's like, I'd say find something that you could do for 18 months and not get a single penny for, and something that you're going to devote 20 to 40 hours of your life on top of the 40-hour a week job that you're going to have to pay the bills or to work down your debt. So get a good, solid, full-time job that's going to pay the bills, and then work 20 to 40 hours a week on that thing that's your passion without expecting any money in return for 18 months. And I think you got a good, solid foundation for duplicating a lot of the success that I've had and seen a lot of other people have. But not many people want to sign up for that one, do they? Right.
Well, it's interesting. There's always two sides of the coin. I think it was Niels Bohr, the great, physicist, philosopher. He said, the opposite of a profound truth is another profound truth. Because you say follow what you love, and then I hear guys like Dane Maxwell say, just go solve a problem. Yep. Even if it's not your passion, if you can go find somebody with a problem that you can then figure out, if it's a big enough problem, you'll go find the answer, bring them the solution, they'll pay you for it.
Right.
And neither one is wrong, but either way, I kind of followed your path. I was in sales and marketing, and I got into sales training on my own. I found Infusionsoft, and started blogging and writing about and documenting the pros and cons of Infusionsoft and email marketing and everything else for a long time. Before the payoff really came.
Well, that's exactly it. You were willing to put in the time before the payoff. Now, you went out and you found a problem. A lot of people have a difficult time, effectively at handling sales. They don't have processes for the funnel, if you will, of how do you get somebody who's a prospect and get them down to becoming a paying customer, and one that actually isn't a customer once and then you lose them, but they're a customer that comes back and buys again and again when you have new products and services. So you went out and find the thing, but I would imagine that as you were researching and before all of a sudden, before you got known for sales and people coming to you like nonstop to where you could actually pay all the bills just with that, there's a period of time where, it gets kind of rough and it gets tough, and it's not, it's not always fun, I guess I should say. It can burn you out. And having a passion for that topic, for me, is what's necessary to keep that determination moving forward.
Right. Yeah. And I didn't even go looking for that, right? My passion was sales and marketing. It was, how can I improve? I'm always reading books. I'm always researching things and then writing about it. I'm fortunate that I like to write. I know it's not natural or normal for a lot of people. Maybe they have to learn it. But like in your case, you started podcasting about the television show Lost, right? So, either way, we're passionate and we find an outlet for that passion. I think that's your main message, right? Is get the work, go do what you love. If it's writing, if it's podcasting, if it's, ice sculptures, go do it and document it.
Absolutely. Do it and document it. And here's the deal. Anything that you do, once you devote enough hours to it, you'll be so proficient in it that people will want to follow in your footsteps. There's nothing you could be interested in and all of a sudden you're the only person on this earth that's interested in that. There's somebody else out there and somebody else that wants to learn from you what you've been able to accomplish.
Right. And so you make that transition, and again, I would say yours was probably harder than most because you had to leave a family business, not just some cold cubicle, in corporate America. You had to tell the family, I'm not going to do this.
Oh, I would love to just continually, back up that, but I want to tell you, it was a whole lot easier than what you make it out to be because
good.
I was in a toxic environment. I love my family. I love my mom. I love my dad. But the insurance agency was my mom, my dad, and my sister, and myself. And we ran an agency that had enough premium and clients that would have easily necessitated a 12 employee agency. And we were running it with 4. And the reason why is because, as family, you talk to each other in a different way than you would an employee.
Right.
And if in an environment where you have 4 employees and 7,000 or 8,000 clients, you have a lot of stress. And when you have a lot of stress and you're free to share your stress, all of a sudden you communicate things in a different way than you would in a professional environment with a bunch of people who are not related to each other. And so when we would hire people, and they wouldn't last too long. And to be honest with you, there were days when I didn't last too long, and I can't remember the number of times when it just wasn't always a lot of fun to be there. And
right.
so it was a lot easier for me to leave than what you would imagine. I would say I'd probably have a harder time leaving a good cubicle job that paid me tons of money and that was kind of a fluff job, whereas with my job it was extremely well paying. I was made lots of money, but it was physically and mentally it was more demanding than anything else I've ever been through.
Right. Well, I think the days of fluff jobs in general are gone anyway. And I think if somebody has one, they should give thanks to the Lord, and B, look over their shoulder, because the hatchet's got to be coming sometime soon.
Absolutely.
So you began podcasting about the television show Lost, right?
Right.
And what made you decide to podcast versus a WordPress blog or something like that?
Well, I was already blogging. I actually started blogging back in 1996 when it was called weblogs.
Wow.
Actually, web journals. And we were using angelfire.com, and I was hand coding HTML pages to make it all happen. So I've always been in technology and communicating my message out to the world, whatever message that happened to be at the time. So the reason I got into podcasting, though, is I discovered podcasting in the summer of 2005 and fell in love with consuming content in that way. And I was already writing blog posts about the TV show Lost, and I actually called in a theory on one of the podcasts that I listened to. And my blog at the time was getting, this is back in 2006, so my blog was getting right around 300 to 500 hits per month, which for me, that was pretty huge because I'm just this guy in Northern Kentucky. Nobody knows who I am. And, well, I was blogging about Lost, and I left this voice message for one of the podcasts I listened to with my theory. And I said at the end of my message, I said, if you want to hear more, or if you want to read further into my theory about this, and also see the screen captures that I've posted to pretty much substantiate everything that I'm saying here, go over to my blog. And I just left my blog URL to that post in the message. They played that on the show, and of course, they had a huge audience of tens of thousands of people. And one of the people that were listening to that was somebody who was up in the higher up ranked department over at entertainmentweekly.com. And so EW.com does an entire story on my theory and links to it. And that immediately showed me the power of a podcast and the reach there. I had, all of a sudden, my blog goes from 300 visits per month all the way up to thousands of visits per month just overnight. And I'm like, that's interesting. And one of my friends said, Cliff, you should start a podcast. Well, it didn't take too many people to tell me that until I actually said, okay, I'll start my own podcast. And I went out and spent $15 on a microphone and plugged it into my computer, got some free software, and I did all the research to learn how to create a podcast. And within a couple days, I had my podcast in iTunes. And by the third episode, I had 17,000 subscribers.
Wow.
And that, my friends, is why I launched a podcast. So I went from hundreds of people who were following what I had to say online to thousands, and then within 10 to 15 episodes, I was in the tens of thousands of people who were now listening to everything that I had to say.
All right, so 99 out of 100 people listening to this podcast are going to say, well, you know what? I don't have any connections at Entertainment Weekly or to Access Hollywood or 60 Minutes, so never mind.
Yeah, and here's what I would tell those people is that, number one, I don't have any connections to Entertainment Weekly. I just happen to call in some voicemail feedback, and you never know who's listening to anything that you put online.
Yep.
The other thing is that it wasn't necessarily that put me on the map. There were some other things out there that happened. One was that the TV show Lost had just got to the place where iTunes would make it available the next day for $1.99 after it aired on television. So there are millions of people who watch the show, hundreds of thousands who are searching for the show the very next day in iTunes, and thousands who see my podcast right underneath the show, the TV episodes, and they click and listen and subscribe to the podcast. So that's how that happened. But the thing is I can reduplicate that with a number of, and have reduplicated it with a number of entertainment-based podcasts. Anytime there's something in popular culture where there are millions of fans out there, I can always tap in and create a podcast with 10,000, 15, and 20,000 subscribers within the course of, within a month or two. It's pretty easy to do. However, that's really, if we stay on the sales and marketing aspect of things, coming to the business category, and this is something I know a lot about. If you look in the iTunes category under podcasts for business, and if you look in the business directory, you look at the top 200, more than 40 of the top 50 podcasts are my clients. And what I can tell you is that those podcasts, there's only the top 5 to top 10 that have more than 10,000 subscribers to it. In fact, if you get approximately 1,000 to 3,000 subscribers, you can easily make it into the top 50 of just about any category in podcasting on iTunes. So you don't need an audience of tens of thousands. So sure, my story of what happened to me with Lost is pretty impressive and exciting, but I can tell you right now, I have a podcast that has less than 10,000 subscribers that generates $30,000 to $50,000 a month in business income for me.
Oh, that's pretty good.
Not too bad.
I can almost live on that in California. That's so much money.
It's not too bad. And of course, that podcast is Podcast Answer Man, which, by the way, I had to build that from scratch. I mean, that had to go from the ground up. Now, out of the thousands of people who listen to my Lost podcast, were there a couple hundred that started subscribing to my podcast about podcasting every single week? Yeah, a couple hundred. But those other thousands and thousands and thousands of people out there who are listening to the Lost podcast, they're not all so excited about Cliff Ravenscraft and podcasting that they want to hear a podcast about podcasting every week. Right. So when I actually launched that podcast a year after I was podcasting, I launched that because I thought, man, I would love it if one day I could leave insurance and do podcasting full time. Right. And so I launched that podcast with the thought that, man, if I'm going to create this in hopes that maybe within 5 years I could leave my career and do podcasting full time. Well, I started that podcast. The first episode was probably downloaded by about 500 people, and then it's, went up to 600, 700, and slowly built. But here's the situation. That podcast actually took off with the number of people who were listening. In 1 year, 12 months later, I left my career in insurance and went into podcasting full time. Wow. And by the way, when I quit my career in insurance, Podcast Answer Man had less than 2,000 subscribers. Wow.
Now, were you making money from both of the podcasts? So, I mean, obviously, right, from your Lost as well as your Podcast Answer Man?
I had made just a little bit of money from my Lost podcast, and I would say somewhere between $500 to $2,000 a month would come in from that show. Certainly not enough to provide for my family of 5 in a single income family, which is what we were and still are today. So I have a wife and 3 kids. I wasn't going to be able to support my family on $2,000 a month. So that's not where the money was coming in. But where the money was coming in was actually through creating products and services. Training people and teaching people how to podcast one-on-one at the time is what I was doing most of. And then I was doing equipment sales. So I was an official reseller for a major, large pro audio company. And also I would create webinars and invite people in large groups to pay a lower cost than my one-on-one rate. And I would teach them how to podcast that way. And so those are the 3 things that I had going on. Oh, and also affiliate sales. So basically companies that I work with that offer commissions for each time I refer to them. That is another way. So those are the 4 main areas of income. I had one-on-one consulting, equipment sales. Then there was affiliate commissions and whatever the other one in the webinars that I was doing. And yeah, I did have a little bit of advertising here and there, but the advertising is something I never relied on.
Right. So how does somebody listening to this right now, what are the first 3 or 5 or 7 things they need to go do to make their first podcast?
Well, I have a free tutorial. It's at learnhowtopodcast.com.
Okay.
And it's not one of those things. And by the way, I have no sales funnel for you at all, other than just go there. And if you launch a podcast, that's great. But it's learnhowtopodcast.com. There's no request for your email address or anything like that. I just give it away free to the world. About 300 people per month launch a podcast without hiring me, and I think that's absolutely awesome. And they don't need to purchase anything from me. But the thing is I've helped those people get their voice out to the world. And I can tell you, those 300 people a month are always telling other people about my stuff. I put this, I think the tutorial's been online for just over a year or so now. 40,000 people, more than 40,000 people have seen the first video. There are 8 videos. More than 40,000 have seen the first video there. And 10 to 14,000 people have gone through all 8 videos and actually launched a podcast without hiring me. But here's the deal. Of the 40,000 people who watched the video but didn't actually go through the entire course, those people are either on my mailing list or listening and subscribe to my podcast, where they are coming to know, like, and trust me. And ultimately, a good number of those people end up getting to the place where they now feel like, oh my gosh, I am ready to launch a podcast. I want to work with Cliff. And by the way, I'm no longer available for one-on-one consulting and coaching. Now, the only option I have to work with me directly is through a 4-week training course that's $2,000. And I do that course about once every other month or once every 3 months. And it's got to have a minimum of 20 students in it for me to do the course. And I've done that. I think I'm on my 13th one coming up in September here. And every single time I've had a minimum of 20 students.
Nice. So learnhowtopodcast.com.
Yep.
All right.
Learnhowtopodcast.com. That's going to walk you through. I mean, that's the entire foundation of what it takes to create a successful podcast. And it walks you through the understanding of how podcasting works. Everything you need to know is there. If you wanted to do podcasting the way that I do it, the only other missing piece there is, instead of using a free service, one of the free blogging sites out there, you can instead use WordPress and configure it for your podcast. And I actually do have a tutorial. It's called WordPress for Podcasters on my products page. And that tutorial will show you how to set it up. And if you're a technical person, you can get through everything just with that one tutorial. But as far as anything else that you want to do to podcast, here's what I would suggest is, before you go out and buy your equipment, before you go out and figure out how to get into iTunes and stuff like that, the important thing that you need to do first is ask yourself this question: why do I want to podcast? What do I want to podcast about? And who is my target audience? And I'm absolutely shocked at the number of people who come to me and hire me or go through my course, and they have no clue at all about why they want to podcast, what they want to podcast about, or who they're trying to reach with their show. But the number of people who actually sign up and pay for a $2,000 course, and we spend the entire first 1 or 2 weeks trying to solve that, it boggles my mind. But that's where I would recommend that you really start, is asking yourself, who am I going to podcast to? What am I going to podcast about, and why on earth am I doing this? What specific goals do I have? Right. And that's, I see that with anything. I see that with Infusionsoft when I'm consulting. I'm actually, my graphics guy, we're working up a logo, the Pabst Blue Ribbon, yep.
The PBR, we're actually mirroring that. And I've come up with process before login, PBL. And it's, what's your process? So it's the same thing. When we're trying to automate their sales and marketing, they don't have a process. They're like, well, show me where to click. I'm like, why do you even want to click? What are you going to do? And they're like, I don't know.
Yeah, it's like, it's like, okay, so we're going to create this entire system. But what is it that you want to sell? Oh, I haven't figured that out yet. I don't have a product. I just need to get them in the funnel. I just need to get them listening to the podcast.
Yeah, well, I mean, they'll have a product, but I'm like, what's your funnel, right? What's your free report? How do you follow up? You want to send an email? Do you want to sign a task to make a phone call? Do you want to send a letter? You want to do that 1 day apart, 3 days apart, 2 weeks apart? Well, I don't know. I just do it. Well, we got to map it out, create your process before you even log in. Then you'll have success. So I think it's the same thing with any technology.
Yeah.
People are looking for that silver bullet. Do you do much video on the podcast, or do you stick strictly with voice?
I prefer audio over video. I do a lot of video, but never really do it as a video podcast. Which, by the way, podcasting can be audio or video. It's just a podcast by definition is a digital media file, so it could be audio or video that is delivered via RSS feed. That's all there is to it. So. But I stick with audio, and I prefer audio, and the reason why is because it doesn't require screen time. That means that I can reach those 97 million people in the United States that drive to work alone with an average commute time of 26.2 minutes. And I can also reach all those millions of people who are on the treadmills or jogging or walking their dogs or doing the laundry or washing the dishes. All of these different things people can do where all they're focused on is this repetitive task that really needs no mental, brain power. And while they're just walking or while they're doing the dishes, they're 100% completely focused on every word that comes out of my mouth. And I absolutely love that. When it comes to video, number one, it takes so long to produce it. It's more expensive and crazy to make it professional. With audio, gosh, I can spend $2,000 or less. You spend a lot less and still sound as great as any FM radio DJ's ever sounded. But when it comes to video, you're going to have to invest in a little bit more to try to get something to the quality of what people are used to on television. Right. So I like it for that reason as well. But do I use video? I use video. One of the things that I've tried to communicate to people is I don't want people to see podcasting as an occupation. I don't want people to see a podcast as a business. That I get a number of people say, Cliff, I lost my job and I need to create a podcast, and I want this podcast to start paying me, as my full-time income within 12 to 18 months. And I'm like, okay, I don't think that's a great idea, but I think let's talk about this. So the situation is I recommend people instead they actually create a business. And a podcast is a part of the way of communicating with your target audience about the things that you have to share, your products or services, or your message. It doesn't have to be a for-profit venture at all. But and here's the deal. I don't think that it should be just a podcast. You should have a home on the web, which is a website. And I'm fond of WordPress. I think it's the best platform out there. And I do think you should be creating written blog posts, a minimum of one written blog post every single month, and preferably more if you can actually push yourself to write more. But then, of course, I'm a huge fan of audio podcasting. I believe having a weekly podcast that's between 20 to 40 minutes in length is perfect and can cause you to become a part of somebody's regular, habitual habits of what they do every single week. And if you ever go on vacation for 2 weeks and you don't release an episode, all of a sudden there's a couple hundred people whose lives are radically altered in a weird way. There's for 2 weeks they're in an altered state of consciousness because you're not there to plug into them every single month, whatever it is your message is there. And I say that because there are about 5 different podcasts that I never miss. And, there's one of them I listen to, and he goes on vacation, 2-week vacations all the time, several times a year. And, man, when he's gone, my mindset is different. It's like, wow, I need my daily dose of this show to really – it's kind of like, man, it feels like I haven't taken my vitamin B for 3 weeks. So it really, you can become a part of people's lives that way. So I like written blog posts. I love the weekly audio format, and I do a ton of video. And of course, if you go to learnhowtopodcast.com, you'll see all 8 of those videos are on YouTube, and it's on a YouTube channel. And I just embed those as video blog posts or a page on my site, which will be an entire series like you see there. But I reserve video for when video is necessary to communicate what it is I want to communicate. I see a lot of people out there creating video, and all the video is you looking at their faces. And I'm like, why? Why are you begging me to look at a video screen? And they're like, well, you could just listen to the audio. I'm like, no. Here's what I don't like about your philosophy of recording your video of your faces and then saying you could just listen to the audio. The fact that you have cameras on, I guarantee you have a 40-minute conversation. Somewhere in that conversation, somebody's going to hold up something to the camera, and you as the host of your show, you're going to say, for those of you who are lowlifes, second-rate citizens in my community and only listening to the audio, what you're missing is his really cool thing he's holding up to the camera right now. Mm-hmm. Whatever. Why was that necessary? Anyway, not that I'm bitter or anything like that, but I just think if you're gonna ask for somebody to give you screen time, make it something worth looking at.
But Cliff, I'm pretty.
Well, that's great. Then you're worth looking at, right? What if your guest is not pretty? I mean, seriously, I'm being serious here. Okay, I know this is not going to sound right, and people are going to hate me. That's fine. But I want to tell you, there's a ton of people that I've seen do video interviews, and the person who hosts the show, they got their act together. I mean, it looks like they had somebody professionally do their makeup before they get the lighting on, and they invite this really important guest. I mean, this is like the CEO of a major company, and all of a sudden they convince him to do this video interview because it's going to add to their credibility and blah, 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 right? You following me so far?
I'm following.
And then all of a sudden the CEO gets on there and his hair's out of whack and his hairpiece is a little off to the side because of his headset. And the guy looks like a total doofus and completely, in my mind, makes him look like a low rate. Who is this guy they just brought in off the street? And this is somebody who, if you would have done it as an audio podcast, man, you would have really saved this guy, right. This PR nightmare of, and not to mention the fact that if you don't even go into YouTube and have the ability or haven't activated the ability to upload a custom thumbnail, there's nothing worse than that halfway blurry thumbnail that YouTube chooses, and it's the worst moment in the video where the guy's got that crooked mouth smile.
Always. Eyes closed, crooked mouth, head tilted, tongue out.
He looks like he's on meth. Can you tell that I prefer audio?
I can tell. So you mentioned YouTube. Do you do much with Vimeo? Do you have a recommendation when to use one or the other?
I always use YouTube whenever I can. I like Vimeo, the pro accounts, where if you've got some digital products and stuff like that, you can upload it to them. You can make it unlisted so it's not searchable on their servers or anywhere else on the web. And you can basically password protect the page. Nobody can get it, but you can still get it to where you can embed it on a website, and you can even secure it to say, I only want to embed it on this domain. And then you can put it only on your website, and you can password protect those pages and all those other things. I kind of like that about Vimeo, but here's the deal. I don't worry too much about, quote unquote piracy. But what I'd prefer is most of my content, I like to have it up there on YouTube, because YouTube is the number 2 search engine in the world, and the more content that I can put there, the better. And so if I have a video that's available to the public and it's offered for free, there's no reason for me to put that on Vimeo. I mean, maybe I can put it on Vimeo and YouTube, but man, if it's available to the public and it's free, it's going on YouTube.
Right. And that's what I followed. I mean, my premium stuff, I use Customer Hub, through Infusionsoft, and it's a membership, so it's just protected there. And I haven't really messed with Vimeo yet. Those 2 steps meet my needs, but I'm glad you mentioned that, because most people, and I think you're kind of like me, right? I mean, we're trying to help the most people as possible. And sure, we get paying clients, they'll pay us more and we'll do more for them. But most people just need a kick in the pants and go get started. And the last thing I want to do is put an obstacle in their way around money.
Right.
You know, use YouTube and, I tell them worst case, record it on your iPhone, record the audio, record the video, upload it. It's good enough. Get started.
Yeah.
Would you say that's what holds back most people is just failure to launch?
Well, I would say it's failure to launch, but it's also most of the time it's I don't know what to communicate. How do I communicate it and stuff like that? And the number of people who just throw up a video and you can just tell that this is the 73rd take. and they got rings under their eye. They look like raccoons and stuff like that. And I'm all about, just record it, set it, forget it, and put it out there. You can always improve later. And that is absolutely the case. But man, practice what you're going to say. Create yourself an outline. That's one thing that I see that a lot of people fail to do. They just think that they can actually they can go put the camera up on a tripod, stand at the other end of the room, and then just speak and miraculously have this beautifully produced message to the world. And it just doesn't work that way.
Yeah, most people don't want to take the time to do that type of prep work.
Yeah, absolutely. And for Podcast Answer Man, every week for my show, I prep a minimum of 1 hour. And I mean, absolute minimum. And I do a show every single week. I got 326 episodes out there. And I usually spend somewhere between 1 to 3 hours in show prep for the show. And it usually takes me about, actually every episode's an hour in length. And then I usually spend anywhere between 1 to 3 hours in post-production. Most of the time of that is spent putting my show notes together because my show notes are, quote unquote, in essence, my blog posts.
Right. My confession is I don't do a lot of outlines, but like when I'm doing things like on Infusionsoft, I mean, I'm showing the screen and I'm teaching.
Well, that's different. A screencast is completely different than standing in there in front of the camera and it's you on. I mean, because in doing a screencast, you can always do what you can do in audio, and that is you can easily do edits and nobody will know. There's no different jump in the screen where, wait a second, you were 2 inches to the left before and you just jumped over it. What the heck? How did that happen?
Right.
Screen. But yeah, go ahead.
I still keep it real. I've got a guy, I saw him a few months ago and he was laughing because I was filming. Like I'll put myself in the bottom corner just so you know that I'm there. But otherwise it's the whole screen, right? And I'm teaching and covering and like my neighbor started mowing and I had the door open, I'm like, hey, hold on a second. I get up and close the door. My neighbor's mowing, and I just keep going. Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that. And by the way, I used to do that a whole lot and I still do that in some productions. But the one thing I have tried to do more with my brand that generates the most income is, it's for me, I'm always trying to, in my message is taking it to the next level. And I definitely never want to lose out on the authenticity. And I think probably what you've got going on there, Wes, is while you may not have, while you could have polished it and made it more professional, which I think has benefits over not having it polished and professional looking. But at the same time, what you did is you achieved a different benefit that could help you with a certain number of people. It depends on who you're trying to reach.
Right.
And sometimes you're going to do better with one or the other. And the fact that you just left the camera running while you went up and shut the window while the guy's cutting his grass next door, you really upped the authenticity factor there. And the authenticity factor is huge, especially when somebody might think, wow, I really want to learn from you, but I think that you're just a perfect person and I'm this guy who may or may not be able to grasp this. When you up the authenticity factor and you allow people to see that you're just a real dude and you have to get up and close the window when the guy's mowing the grass, all of a sudden it's like, wait a second, I can relate to Wes. I feel like, man, if Wes is just a regular guy doing this in his basement, so can I.
Right. And I give that same advice. I mean, I've got clients that are accountants and my wife's OBGYN, a friend of mine that's an attorney, and I tell them, you're going to have a little different level of sophistication in your marketing than I would, but conversely, I was just in Texas. I saw this guy, big billboard, dude with dreadlocks and the cutout, on the billboard where it kind of extends over the top. And he's an attorney,
Right.
So he's going for the edgy, it was something like, not your everyday attorney or something. I forget what it was, but it was like, that got my attention.
Absolutely.
If I needed an attorney in Texas, I might call that guy.
Exactly.
So, I mean, there are no 100% right ways to do things. We just got to go do it, right? And then we'll figure out maybe the 100% way for ourselves.
That's the big thing. Get out there and do it. And that is something that I teach a lot of my clients is, don't try to be perfect and professional within your first 10 episodes. It's just not going to happen. I mean,
Right.
there are some exceptions. I've seen some people and it just shocked me. It's like, wait, I think what you just created is better than what I've done. And I've done 3,100 plus episodes.
Right.
But those are few and far between. Most people, their first episode is horrible. And by the way, my first episode was horrible. I love it. Matter of fact, Wes, have you ever heard my first episode ever?
I have not.
Well, I'll tell you what. I have the ability to play my audio through here. Let me just play for folks. People, you hear my voice now, right? So I'm going to click play here, and I'm going to fast forward through the horrible music. And here's my first episode. Another Lost podcast that is 100% all Lost-related items, just like various other shows that I'll mention in just a moment. Or if I wanted to do a technology-related podcast, like many of them out there. I don't know if I was pinching my nose or what. I've got a podcast, and I'm not. I sounded horrible.
I was going to say, did you have a head cold while speaking through a Campbell's soup can while sitting inside of a very large microwave?
And the funny thing is, though, is by the third episode using that gear, I had 17,000 subscribers.
Nice.
Good thing I didn't wait until I sounded, like a radio professional DJ with my, $2,000 worth of gear sitting in front of me. I didn't wait until I had that. I actually started with what I had and moved forward and grew into this other stuff.
Sure, but that's a great example of what we always teach, multimedia, right? Multi-step. I mean, in your case, you were using the telephone, right? You were using the website to call in and get you some exposure. I had Pam Slim on a few weeks ago, Escape from Cubicle Nation, and her big break was when she emailed Guy Kawasaki, like her 7 tips, and he's a big fan of top 10 tips. He said, hey, can you make these 10? She says, yes. She redid them as 10. He posted it on his blog, and boom, She had all these followers because she put herself out there, and that's what you did. And, good enough was good enough, right?
Good enough is good enough, and I will say it's good enough to get you started.
Right.
I do become an audio snob at some point, and suggest that I'm always take it to the next level, but don't expect to start out at level 15, start at level 1 and move forward. Or if you can invest, there are some people out there who by all means, they have the resources necessary to completely cut away most of the learning curve and start out at a higher level because they are able to hire somebody to train them and teach them how to do things, and avoid a ton of the big mistakes. But if you're not in that position, by all means, record something, put it online, and course correct as you go along.
Right. One of the best things I heard a guy tell me years ago, he said, if it's worth doing, it's worth doing poorly. Until you get it right, and it kind of shocks you, right? And you think, well, yeah. I mean, the first time we tried to swing a golf club or ride a bike or roller skate, we were terrible at it.
Yep.
But we were young when we did those things, right? We may not even remember, but it was worth doing. So we didn't mind falling until we got it right. But then we get older and we get so self-conscious, we don't start or we don't continue to get past that big hurdle.
Exactly.
Till we get great. Well, hey, I know you've got a busy day. I thank you for taking the time. But again, your main sites, obviously it's podcastanswerman.com, but you gave us also learnhowtopodcast.com. right?
Yep, those are the two big ones. Anything else that you want is available. Actually, they're both the same website. It's just learnhowtopodcast.com takes you to a specific page on that site. So
Gotcha.
any way you want to go, you'll find more stuff there to play around with. The cool thing is I absolutely love my website. The average time spent on my site right now is between 6 to 8 minutes. And that's among, right around 30,000 visitors per month right now. And
nice.
that's pretty huge. And what I'm hoping is that you'll find some content there. You'll click play and listen to an episode, check out some of the video resources. There's tons there, thousands of hours worth of stuff.
And then your course coming up, obviously this podcast will live through eternity. But you've got one coming up this month. And do you have a limit on those, or do you just have a minimum?
Well, I'm going to try. Actually, this will be the first time where I'm actually shooting for 40 people on my course, which will be pretty awesome if I can pull that off. The most I've done is 36 in the past. Okay. But I've actually got things down pretty well, and I've got some people on standby that I hired, some other consultants from my referral network if there's some technical questions that I need to delegate out to some of my friends. But September 23rd, 2013 is the next 4-week course, but there's always going to be other courses that come along. But yeah, that's where it's at podcastinga2z.com. Okay.
I've got it down, and that'll be in the show notes.
Excellent.
Well, thank you, sir.
Wes, thank you. It's good to meet you, and I really appreciate the opportunity here, and I hope that it doesn't take 3 more years to get to the next 18 episodes now that you're up and running. And, of course, here's the deal. Today's the day, man, for podcasting. Cell phones, mobile phones, it's never been easier to consume a podcast.
Yep, and I listen to them all the time as well. I love them.
All right, man, take it easy. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Cliff.
There you have it. Today's the day for podcasting. But if you notice what Cliff said, your website is the hub, right? That is the center of your marketing universe. He recommends WordPress, as I do. He is leveraging video. He is leveraging premium content, password-protected membership sites, follow-up sequences, etc. But he's also giving away his best stuff for free right up front. If you go back and listen, you can begin one of his programs, those 8 videos, completely free without even opting in, because he's no longer even taking on private clients. So to be recognized as the expert, you first must be recognized. So what are you doing to put yourself out there to be known and seen as the expert in your industry, in your niche, in your marketplace? I always tell people, if you were arrested for being in sales and marketing, would there be enough evidence to convict you? Make sure you're doing things to get found. As of this moment, September 17th, 2013, I'm still taking on private clients, but that will change in Q1 of 2014. So if you still need help with sales, with marketing, with Infusionsoft, with your CRM, with sales training, copywriting, please visit thesaleswhisperer.com and look me up. Schedule the Contact Us web form, and my assistant will be in touch and set up a time for us to talk. In the meantime, I thank you for listening to the Sales Whisperer podcast, which you can visit at thesaleswhisperer.com. Good selling.